Well, I'm here with Rodney Dale. A lot of people will know Rod, see him around the place, see him at the church. But not everybody, Rod, will know that your childhood wasn't a normal childhood, was it?
No, it wasn't really, because at the age of 3, I left Wynyard and I flew up to New Guinea. I flew up to West Irian, which is part of the western side of the Indonesian half of New Guinea, and we went up into the jungle area of central New Guinea, and we went to a place called Citywide to start with, and that was where the Dani tribe lived. The Dani tribe had recently been converted to Christianity, and a lot of them had become Christians. A lot of people in the Danis had become Christians. So there was a great movement of the Lord in the Dani area. And that was in Citywide. So that was the first place that we went to.
So you went there with your dad, who
yes,
was
that's right,
Stan.
Yes.
And your mum?
Yes.
What was her name?
Pat.
Patricia. And how many kids were there?
There were 5 kids of us all together. 5 of us that went up there initially.
And you were 3?
Yeah, I was 3 when I left Wynyard, yeah.
Now, your dad had been to New Guinea before?
Yeah, he had been, and he was actually a soldier in New Guinea before, and he actually fought the Japanese up there because he was just an SAS man. He completed the SAS course successfully and became a commando, and he was commando hunting the Japanese up there. So that's where he got interested in New Guinea.
So you were in New Guinea, you came home for a little bit, but you were there from the time you were 3 till the time you were 9, is that right?
Actually, it was 11 when I left.
You were 11?
Yeah, when I left, yeah.
And I can't imagine, what was it like growing up in New Guinea?
Well, it was different from Australia, obviously, because all my friends were native people, and all the people around there, they're all native people. So, but we did correspondence school, and we sent our schoolwork back to Wynyard, back to Tasmania, and they corrected it and sent it back to us. So that's why we were educated by correspondence. Now,
your dad developed a reputation for going to some of the hardest places, and in fact, I think there were a couple of times where he was attacked but survived. Is that right?
That's right. Well, in 1966, after we went back there, after being on furlough, we went back there, and he challenged the people there to burn their fetishes, because if they believe in God and if they wanted to take on Jesus, they had to get rid of all their idols and all their fetishes. So some of the men, the Christian men, who had just become Christians, came down and put all their fetishes in a big heap in the middle of the airstrip. And I can remember pouring petrol over it and burning the whole lot of it. The fetishes were little bits of pig fat and little bits of wood and stone and stuff like that, bits of arrowhead, stuff that they shot someone with. And they believed that these things were idols for Kimbu. And Kimbu was the biggest spirit that controlled all these people. They had tremendous belief in the Kimbu spirit, and he had a lot of power up there too, because the Kimbu, whatever the Kimbu said, they have to do. And if they burnt their fetishes, well, then that would bring fear and destruction on them, because what happened with Kimbu was the most important thing, and that's why all the men had all the power around there.
Yeah, wow.
And the women didn't have any power at all, because all the men, they were the only ones who could believe in spirits, and they had little spirit houses up there, and they'd go into these houses with all their fetishes, and they'd have the little meetings in these spirit houses.
So what happened when your dad got them to burn all those things?
Well, when they burnt all their fetishes, there was a immediate hostility in the neighbouring tribes around us, and anyway, one of the tribes that wasn't so far away from us, down the Helic River, which is the main river where we lived, they invited some of the Christians to come down and preach about Jesus to them, because they wanted to hear about Jesus too. So Yakwaragor and Bingawalk, who were two of my friends, they volunteered to go down there and tell the people about Jesus. So they were just new Christians, so they hadn't been Christians for long, but they volunteered to go down and preach to them. So Yakwaragor and Bingawalk went down to the Helic, and they preached to these people who were down there. But they didn't know that the people actually were hostile to them, and they were actually ambushed there when they went down there and shot. Yeah. And
was your dad shot then as well? Was it?
Well, after that, my dad called in some policemen, some Indonesian policemen from the main port, which was Jarapura, and they flew in, and they came in with the guns and things, and they decided to do a little patrol down to the valley to see what had happened to Yakwaragor and Bingawalk, because he wanted to find out where they were and where the bodies were. So they went down this valley, and it was a pretty steep walk down there. I've actually done the walk myself when I went back there in 2006. I walked down the same valley, and it's a really steep walk, and it's hard to get your footings on the way down there. But he walked down there with this policeman, and he got to a little hut and decided he'd stop at the hut because it was around about dusk time, and he started cooking some rice. And while he was cooking the rice, a lot of the warriors from this tribe, they came around and they started shooting him through the hut, through the walls of the hut. They put their arrows in there and started letting fire arrows at him left, right and centre. So he was shot 5 times in his hut, and he was wounded pretty badly from the arrow wounds. And the people there, and they had a big shout because the policeman there was trying to fire his gun, but his gun jammed and he couldn't do anything with it. And then finally the other policeman came back, and he shot one of the people that was trying to shoot my dad, and they all dispersed, and left Dad there with 5 arrow wounds in him. And so Liliap, who was one of the new Christians, who'd done the walk with my dad down to this valley, he helped get my dad's gear together, and decided he'd have to walk out because he couldn't stay there. So he walked out for a little while, and he got to a river. He managed to walk over the river and fought up, and then it's dark. And when it gets dark, and it gets jet black in the middle of the night, and but he had to keep on walking. He had to walk up this mountain range to the mountain called Lilligan. And he had to walk all up to Lilligan to get out. And he still had the 5 arrows in him, and he was almost losing consciousness as he walked out. But he managed to find his way up this mountain, and got to this place called Lilligan. And when he finally got there, Liliap, who was his helper there, he made a little stretcher for him, and put him on the stretcher, and they carried him back to Ninia, which was the station where he left from. And when he was there, the aeroplane, the MEF aeroplane, came in and landed on the airstrip. So he could immediately be taken out to Citywide, where there's a hospital out there. See,
and they developed a reputation that they couldn't kill him, didn't they? Because he'd been shot with 5 arrows.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and he walked out. Yeah,
which is amazing.
Yeah, he was a very fit man, my father, because to walk out with 5 arrow wounds in you, because he pulled the arrows out straight away, but still, he still had the wound in him, you see.
Yeah.
And the infection would have been going straight through him.
Yeah.
Because you get really bad infections up there. And he would have got infected and all that sort of thing. But the aeroplane came in and flew him out to Citywide, where he's able to get medical attention.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 9 when that happened.
So can you remember?
I can remember it really well, yeah.
Wow. And then it was a few years later?
Yeah, it was about 2 years later after that.
Yeah.
Where my dad decided to do a walk with Phil Masters from Ninia to Corripoon, which is between the two stations in the Yala district. And he decided to do this walk to look for another airstrip site and a place to spread the gospel in between these two villages. So we all flew out to Corripoon, and then my dad and Phil Masters, they left there, and they walked and they started their trek. And they took with them a few. They had a few carriers because they need someone to carry their two-way radio in a bit of gear. So they had a couple of Dunny carriers and a Yali carrier with them, or Yemu. And then they started to go toward the Solo River and the Seng River.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened?
And anyway, they got to the Seng River, and there was a big tribe of people, warriors started following them, and they said, "Oh, we're going to kill you now, because you've burnt your fetuses, and we don't want you around here." And my father had a two-way chart which showed the way to destruction and the way to heaven, like the narrow road and the wide road. He pulled out the chart and started preaching to him with his chart. Anyway, they didn't take any notice of it, and they surrounded him and started firing arrows into him. And he pulled out all the arrows that they could, but they kept on firing arrows into him. And he had about 100 arrows fired into him and before he died. And he was pulling them out non-stop, even though he was, I don't know how he could pull the arrows out under those conditions. But anyway, he did. And anyway, finally he fell, and Phil Masters, who was just about 100 metres in front of him, he was shot too, because they couldn't get away. They couldn't get away from all these warriors that had surrounded them. Yeah. So they both got killed there, and the carriers who went with them, they escaped, and they ran over the mountain range. It was a 12,000 foot mountain range, so it was really high. They got up to the high mountain range, and they looked down, and they could see the little tin roofs glistening right down below. And they said, "Oh, that must be Ninia," they said, and they made their way down to where these little roofs were, and they got down there. But they weren't in Ninia, they actually gone to Angugunak, which was a neighbouring expedition station next to us, because they missed the pass that goes over to Ninia, and they've gone over the high pass, which went out to Angugunak. So they ended up there, and there was a German missionary there called Zoller, I think his name was, and he couldn't understand the Dani language, you see, because the Dani language is totally different from the Yali language, and it's only a few tribes, there's only a few valleys over, but still there's 500 different languages.
Wow.
In New Guinea, 500 completely different languages.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, but they're linguistically totally different from each other.
So how did they get the word back?
Anyway, they came down to this missionary who had two-way radio, and they started telling him what had happened. Started telling the missionary what had happened to my father and Phil Masters, and he couldn't understand them, but he could tell by the way they were gesturing and stuff like that that two men had been shot, and he put them on the radio to Citywide, where Dave Martin was on the radio, and they said in Dunny that my father and Phil Masters had been killed down there. Yeah, so the word got back to us because we listened to the radio in Corapoon.
So you heard them
Yeah,
saying that?
we heard them saying that, yeah. And so we...
And how old were you?
I was 11 at the stage, yeah.
I can't imagine what it would be like for an 11-year-old boy to hear that, mate. What was it? I don't even know how I can ask. What was it? How did you cope?
Oh, well, it was pretty traumatic when I first got the news, but that night we had an earthquake, and there's a big bookshelf. I was sleeping in the lounge room, and the bookshelf fell down and just missed me. Just fell at the foot of my bed. So I was very lucky that I didn't get killed by the earthquake, because it was tremendous shaking, and after that we left Corapoon and went to Kitabakia. We went back to Dingy, got some of our stuff, and then went to Kitabakia from there.
I can't imagine what it was like. Now, the story doesn't finish there. That tribe eventually became Christians.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And there's a book written about the story, isn't there?
There is this book here called Lords of the Earth. And it's good book. It's about Don Richardson wrote it.
And he's the same man that wrote the book, the Peace Child book.
That's right, yeah. But he wrote this book because he knew my father up there. Because he was in the same missionary station as we were. So he was in the same union, the Regions Beyond Missionary Union. And he was the missionary in the southern part of Irian, which was in the Headhunter country.
And Rod, you then, as an 11-year-old, had to process all that. And how long was it before you came back to Australia then?
Well, after we actually, Mum and my two sisters left Irian around about, I think this happened in September 25th. And after we were there for about another month after that, because Mum was trying to finish translating the Gospel of Mark, because my father had translated the Gospel of Mark into the Yali language, and she just finished typing it up. So she typed up the Gospel of Mark, so they had something to read, because we had to teach the people how to read to start with.
So your mum stayed there and finished the job, even after her husband
That's right, yeah.
had been killed?
Yeah. And then we came back to Australia after that. So we were up there this was 1968 when this happened. And by October 1968, we were back in Australia, back in Tasmania.
And so where did you come back to? Was it up the northwest coast?
Yes, up the northwest coast, yeah. Because my auntie had a farm up there. She lived up in a place called Lyalea, which was up near Smithton. So we went up there, and my grandfather had a house in Smithton.
So, mate, can you remember what it was like coming back from New Guinea after living through not only a literal earthquake, but also the what would have felt like an earthquake with your dad being killed? And then you come back to a different culture.
It was a bit of a culture shock coming back here, but I adjusted pretty well to it, because it wasn't too long before I got interested in football and interested in what happens down here. See, so all my focus went off New Guinea, and I started thinking about my life around here. So I started following Collingwood. I said, "Oh, come on, Collingwood, come on!"
I'm sorry to hear that.
Got to win. They got to win, yeah. And I did those sort of things. I did the things that most young fellows do.
So what did you do from age of 11 through to about the age of 20? What were you doing?
I went to high school, and went to high school in Melbourne.
Was that like a boarding school?
No, it wasn't a boarding school, because we had a house in Melbourne. Mum bought a house there, and we lived in this house in Ringwood, in East Ringwood. We lived in the house there and went to school in Ringwood High School. And I didn't really tell many people about what happened to my dad, because I thought it'd be too demanding on me to tell them about it. So I kept it pretty quiet, what happened to him. A few people knew, but not too many. But a few people in church knew about it. But I didn't talk about it too much openly to people.
Yeah.
And after I finished school, came back here, and went crayfishing. So I went crayfishing at Bridport, and worked for a fellow up there called Philip Armstrong for a while. And then, and after that, I went to New Zealand. I travelled around New Zealand for about a year and a half, just like the travelling style.
Yeah.
And then I travelled right through Australia, went right to Cairns and right to northern Queensland, and came back down. Yeah, and when I was up there, I actually got involved in the Christian community up there.
Oh yeah.
It was in northern New South Wales, in Wollongbar, which is around about the place of where Byron Bay is,
Yes.
around there. And I got involved in this Christian community, which is a great help to me, because it got me involved in Christian things again. Because before that, I hadn't walked with the Lord, although the Lord had always reminded me that He was there looking after me. And I could think of many situations when my life was actually saved by the Lord, but I didn't even have any idea about it, because at the time I didn't have any sort of thoughts about God or Christianity or anything like that. But it was only when I got involved with this Christian community up there that I realised that God had been there right through my life, and He'd been protecting me.
Mm.
So He'd been keeping me going, and he had looked after me through all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you continued to take a journey, and so tell us what happened between there and now. What I mean, of course, trying to sum up, I don't know, like 50 years in 3 minutes is not an easy thing to do, but you've certainly been on a big journey, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, after I left Wollongbar, I came back down to Sydney. I lived down there for a while. And then after that, I decided to go to Tasmania, because I couldn't stand the traffic in Sydney. I was driving through traffic every day, and the traffic was too coronary-inducing for me, so I got out of Sydney and went back to went down to a little place called Loon River, which is right down south of Tasmania. It's the most southerly place you can go to.
Yeah.
I lived down there for a while, and I enjoyed that sort of lifestyle, because I was right out in the bush, and I was doing a lot of bushwalking, and I was living out in the bush, and I got involved with the youth hostel down there, and started running that. So that was what I did for a while, and then I worked in the fish farm, and worked in apple orchards, and doing a few jobs like that around the place. Yeah.
And eventually you'd meet Julie.
Yeah. I met Julie in St Albans, which is the Edge Church, which is Claremont Anglican Church. I met her there.
And you've had a few health challenges.
Yeah, well, in 2007, I had my first stroke, which debilitated my speech somewhat, so I can't really speak too clearly. So I have to actually accentuate every syllable I speak, so I get it out so people can understand me.
That would be really frustrating.
It was a little bit, because I couldn't actually speak directly after the stroke, because I had speech problems with my speech, and I just had to work on my speech slowly so people could understand my speech.
Yeah.
And but after a while, after I was in there about a month or so, they let me go, because they thought my speech had improved quite a lot from what it was. And I started going around and doing the other things, because I was still in the church at this stage. And in 2010, I met Julie and married Julie. And in 2012, I went up to Mount Tamarine to see my brother up there. And while I was up there, I had another stroke.
Wow.
And that was that affected my my left fingers, because I still got tingling in these fingers. Even though I've still got plenty of strength in the fingers,
Yeah.
I've still got this tingling sensation in the fingers. So that was another effect of that stroke. And in 2015, I had my third stroke, which affected this leg. This leg goes to sleep sometimes and gets really a bit numb and goes a bit cold. But I still got strength in this leg, so I could still do most things with this leg. And I got involved with the community down here. I'm involved with the Choir of High Hopes, which is a choir, which is a community choir, and it's a really good avenue for getting out amongst people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I love the Choir of
yeah,
High Hopes. You guys perform all over the place.
Yeah.
And John Coleman's often been part of that.
He has, yeah.
He's a very special man here in Hobart.
Yeah.
So, how would you say God has looked after you on this journey? You've had an amazing life, Rodney.
Yeah, I've had a pretty amazing time because, especially in my childhood, which I didn't really put it out myself because I just came along in tow with my father, sort of thing, and I was just the kid there. I was just on show, but I wasn't really involved in the Christian work up there. But I was still able to see what happened up there, and still had good knowledge of what Jesus had done. So I could tell what Jesus had done from an early age, and I knew about his amazing ability to change things because I knew that the Lord works in an amazing way, and He's wonders to perform, and I could still see from what happened to the people in the same valley that they were moved to become Christians, and there's 9 churches around Linear area now. 9 churches just around the area.
So in the area where your dad was killed, there are now 9 churches.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, and the whole area has turned to the Lord. So it was amazing. It had an amazing effect. The deaths of my father and Phil Masters had an amazing effect on the population there.
Yeah.
Because after my father got killed there, in a couple of months afterwards, there was a plane crash because there was an MAF plane was flying up between Linear, it was flying between Santani and Wooliga. And they were flying up there and got lost, and no one could find this plane, and no one knew where it went, and the pilot was called Minovoth, and he flew up in this valley. He flew up into the valley, and he tried to turn around when he realised the valley was getting too narrow. But there was a big tree in the way, and the wing hit the tree, and the wing got ripped off, and the plane crashed down, and sprayed petrol all over the place and caught on fire, and everyone in the plane was killed, which is including Menovoth and the humans who were missionaries in Irian who were actually on the radio, and they used to do the skid with us. So that was a big loss for the people in Irian at the time. And but right at the back of the plane, there was a little boy called Paul Newman, and he managed to climb out of the back of the plane, and he didn't know where he was. He tried to tell people, where am I? And no one actually could understand what he was saying. But a man called Kuushu, he was a native man up there, he took him into his house and gave him sweet potato and looked after him for a couple of days while the planes were searching for him, because there was all these MAF planes flying all over the place looking for him. And Paul Pontier, who was the pilot around our area, he worked out of Womana, which was the main station around there. He flew over the Seng Valley, and he dipped his wing down there, and he saw the plane crash there. He couldn't believe it, because it was the same valley which my father had been killed in. And he said, he got on the radio and said, "Oh, I found the plane. It's in the same valley where Stan and Phil were killed." And all the people were listening to it on the radio, and they were all taken up in shock, because they couldn't believe that the plane had actually fallen into the same valley. Because they thought, oh, if they survived, the people there couldn't possibly look after them because they were cannibals. And everyone knew that. So there's a lot of disconcert over this.
Yeah.
And but the after the helicopter came in, they called the helicopter in from Papua New Guinea, and the helicopter arrived, landed near, and it took some of the missionaries from Linia over into the Seng Valley and landed where the plane crashed. And Hank Witherton, who was the main pilot for the MAF up there, he got off the helicopter and looked around and didn't see anyone. And he was just about to leave when someone yelled out to him, and it was actually Paul Newman shouting out to him. And he could come down from the little village further up, and he was still alive. And he'd been cared for by this elder from the Seng Valley. Yeah. And the change in heart of those people was just so incredible. Yeah. And after that, the people there came down in their hundreds, and they were saying, "Oh, bring us the gospel. Tell us about Jesus." Because they all burnt their fetishes, and they all turned to the Lord, who was creator of the whole world, and was the one they wanted to hear about. Yeah. It was just amazing that these wild people who had no clothes, they used to get around with no clothes on, and they run around the bush, just little huts, little sort of bark huts, and they turned to God in the thousands. Yeah. And when they found out that this man was actually the creator of the whole world. Yeah. Yeah. But when you look at Australians, they don't turn to God at all, because they're living down here with all the wealth and big houses and cars and things like that. They don't even just give God a second thought, most of them, anyway. Yeah. So it's amazing to see the people up there who turn to God in such a big way, because the whole valley up there turned to God. And there were many people that came down there and became believers in the Seng Valley.
So when did you hear about that happening?
Well, it was after we got back after we got back in Australia. We were back in Australia. It was about 1969 when we heard about there'd been a plane crash. We heard about a plane crash here, and we were worried about where the plane crashed. Yeah. But when we heard it was the Seng Valley, we were aghast. We couldn't believe it was in the same valley. Yeah. Because it's a big area out there, and there's lots and lots of places that you can actually fly. And the plane landed, crashed in the same valley that my father and Phil Masters had been martyred.
And ultimately, somehow, those two events happening near each other, it was only months apart, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. It's only about 3 months apart, yeah.
And then ultimately the whole tribe comes to faith.
That's right, yeah.
And your dad's death, God ultimately uses. And now that doesn't mean it makes it any easier, really. Like for a little boy losing your dad, it's a big deal.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't make it any easier. But the thing is that I could see that God had moved in a mysterious way up there in an amazing way. Yeah. And I could see from that the reality of God's power to work in the little valley. Yes. Because you could see what he'd done and how he turned people that you never thought would become Christians into believing gospel-believing Christians.
So how can people pray for you, mate, in this next season of your life? After having such an eventful life, how can people be praying for you in this season?
Well, I suppose people could just pray for... I always pray for people in here. Every day I pray for people, and for the work that you want to go out and bring walk up there, because they were the first two martyrs up there. So
and they were your friends?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were good friends of me, and so I always pray for them, and I always pray for the church. The church is in the near area. Yeah. So maybe that's what people can do. They can take some interest in here. And this is a book about the area. It's called The Lords of the Earth, and it's quite a good book. You can get it from Christian bookshops. You might have to order it. You can pick it up.
Yeah. And so for you, that story of your childhood still affects you, and it's where your heart is still.
It is, yeah. That's right. I only remember the things that happened up there like it was yesterday. But still I have a good memory of all the things that happened up there. And it was such an amazing experience that I really think that God put me there in the first place so I could actually experience it.